Any kind of recording in progress that will be on YouTube, and you can refer back to it in the future. But we have an opportunity today, a rare opportunity, to be with a genealogist who has, to my mind and to my experience, done the most complete work on a particular town in Italy that anyone could do. These volumes here speak volumes about the work that John has put in along with his collaborators. And this is the kind of thing that we want to encourage people, Italians, Americans, and others to do, to find our past, begin with genealogy and development in history. A wonderful story that is ours. And John has been a very important and energetic part of our CASA library team, and we're really happy that John has come around to be with us, and he's contributed on many levels. He's highly skilled in the job that he does, the computer service for a private company, and he has helped the Casa Italia library to come into the 20th century are we? The 21st. Well, we're still in the 20th century, I think. But we're catching up. We're catching up. John's helping. So I'm pleased to introduce John Cavallone.
Thank you very much, Dominic. Thank you, everyone, for making it through the winds of Chicagoland to be here today, and those of you that are joining us via Zoom. This project has become a life passion of mine. I had no idea 20 years ago, this has been in the works for 20 years, where it would bring me. It's something that's taken on a life of its own, and I'm happy to be part of a group of people that also have a passion throughout the country, because without their assistance, the work wouldn't be where it is. For those that don't have a Sassani's background, I'm hoping that what you learn today can be a jumping on point for you to do a similar project. Those that came from Europe, other parts of the world to come to America, they took great risk, and they should be remembered. All our family members should be remembered, and I'm just doing my little part in that memory. So this started 20 years ago this fall. My oldest daughter attended Worth Junior High, and Dan Wall, the social studies teacher, asked what family members immigrated to America and why. And as a young teenager visiting my grandparents' house, I didn't pay attention. I didn't pay attention to the talks. So I had no idea what my family was. I had aunts and uncles, first cousins, but throughout my whole life until I was in my 30s, I really didn't grasp family. So I went to my aunt's house, and she was the keeper of information. My grandparents had passed away at that time, and she brought out this picture, and she named everybody in the picture. Vincenzo Cavallone Antonia was named Dora. My great grandfather, Francesco, he was known as Pepinjeek. Rosa Libretti, Mama Ross, Catherine, Michael, Joe, my grandfather, John, and not pictured, Josephine Cavallone, who passed away 9 years earlier of breast cancer. And she showed me the picture once, talked about it, and I was able, it's like I knew them, even though I didn't. So Sassano is in the southern portion of Italy on the west side, part of Valley di Daniel, excuse my mispronunciation. Other towns, Monte San Giamacco, Pagliano, Salina Cosalina, are some of the additional towns that immigrants had come over to the Chicago area, but primarily the area in Chicago we're going to be talking about was the enclave of the Sassanese. And this is a picture of what the town looks like. A lot of the buildings are up into the hills. I've never been there before, but one day I will get there, and walking in the footsteps that my family has walked in for over 200 years would be definitely a blessing. So the first Sassanese to emigrate to America around 1880 settled in Red Bank, New Jersey, New York, and New Haven, Connecticut. And then around 1893, they began to come to Chicago. And it's the Bronzeville area is best, the area is best known as. Grand Boulevard is the neighborhood of the Bronzeville area. And doing some research, I was able to locate an 80-acre map, which there's one hanging up on the wall as well, of ironically 47th Street to 51st Street and Federal Street. So as I was able to put together, okay, this Sassanese family lives at this address and so on and so forth, I was able to plot out where everybody lived. So before the Sassanese settled in Chicago, there were a few Pagliano families, the Latier, Gengione, which the name changed to Angone, and Santoro. Those families came to Chicago a couple of years prior to the Sassanese, and from Monte San Giamacco, Policastro. So they weren't the first. The Sassanese were not the first to settle on Federal Street. Those families were by a couple of years. The earliest record that I have found is a marriage of Cano Stavola and Maria Policastro, February 12th, 1893, and they live a little bit north of the 48th Street enclave, 3023 South Wells Street, and that became Santa Lucia Church after they lived there. The next record I found was February 16th, 1896, marriage of Antonio Lettieri and Maria Stavola. Cano and Maria are brother and sister. This enclave on Federal Street was 3 miles south of Santa Maria Incoronata Church. That was the primary church that the Italians of Federal Street attended. The area of Santa Maria Incoronata is the next Italian enclave, which the question still unanswered is, why did they choose to settle 3 miles south of the church when there was already an existing Italian enclave. Federal Street, 48th and Federal Street, was about 4 miles west of the 1893 World's Fair, the Columbus Exposition. So could it be that that's the reason why? Because that's effectively walking distance. So as I mentioned earlier, this project, it's a collaborative effort. It's a continued collaborative effort. I don't think we can accomplish this type of research without finding others that have equal passion. My late uncle, Rosario DeMille, my aunt, Rosemary Cavallone, Dan Nemec, I learned a ton of how to research from him. Peter Barbella, Pasquale Sorello, Michele, I don't want to butcher his name, but I might, Hertusilo, Giuseppina Deed, Anthony Jude Sotero, Jason Beals, Kim Stankiewicz, the Wilmette Family History Center staff, the Archdiocese of Chicago Catholic Cemetery staff, and many, many cousins I've met since starting this journey. So in 2018, was it 16 years after I started the research, I stumbled on Peter Barbella's The Sassano Project, which is online. He was indexing the civil records, and he obtained the church records going back to the 1600s. And so we're talking 35,000-ish records. And he had just begun putting this stuff into Google Drive spreadsheets with Pasquale. And I had an interest in learning more about my family and to go back to the 1600s. So I would pester him daily. Can you send me this record? Can you send me that record? So Peter said, would you be interested in helping index? Of course I would. That was, I couldn't ask for something better. So before I get into the indexing phase, this is the earliest Stato delle Anime, the State of the Souls parish census from 1714. At the time, there was 1,555 people, approximately 300 families. So if your heritage includes one of the original Sassano names that you see on my banners and everything, we're cousins. We're fifth cousins, seventh cousins. We all share DNA. We're family. So the records are found at familysearch.org, Antonetti, and now Italian Parish Records. Peter donated all the records that he obtained to the ItalianParishRecords.org. So we go through these websites, go document by document, and write down the information. So this is San Giovanni Evangelista 1700 to 1701 marriage record, pages 99 and 100. A little zoom in to that. I know I have Luzzi members here. This is the January 14th, 1701 marriage record of Francesco Antonio Luzzi and Anna Horaci. So this is what the indexes look like. They're shared on the internet. We went through, like I said, line by line, page by page, documenting. This is a page, 1846 page from the marriage records. We would go through who the spouse was, groom, bride, and their families. And it's searchable, so you can do a simple search with the last name, and then if you're creative and you know how to do Google searches, you can use variables in the name, because as we transcribe the information, there were times we couldn't determine how to spell certain names. So sometimes when you do a search, you'll have to maybe drop out one of the Z's, or have a asterisk to look for potential other variable spellings of the name. And that's how, after all this was completed, that we were able to go back and then create the pedigree trees. So this is pedigree of Vincenzo Lizzi. And as you can see, every time you go back, you have 8 great-grandparents, 16 second great-grandparents, 32 third great-grandparents, 64 fourth great-grandparents. So though our surname might not be common by the father of the most current ancestor, somewhere along the lines between your tree and my tree, there's not only going to be one matching family, but in many cases multiple. So if you do a DNA test, it may say that you're a closer match than you really are, because you have multiple ways of sharing that DNA. Another interesting thing is you'll experience potentially pedigree collapse. And what that is my great-grandfather married my great-grandmother's first cousin once removed. So Francesco Cavallone and Antonia Di Bella are in 2 spots of the tree. I don't know if they knew that, but it's true. Some other interesting things, once you have all the data completed, and this is where the analytical side of me comes into play. You look at statistical information, and this is a snapshot of births and deaths, and this is the graph of the deaths. And there's this anomaly in 1817 where 10% of the population perished. I asked Giuseppina D from the Museum of Surnames in Padula what happened. And she told me it was a typhus fever epidemic in 1817. In 1837, it was noted in the death records that there was a cholera epidemic. Cholera, there were many cholera epidemics in Europe in the 1800s and early 1900s. Chicago, also in the late 1800s and early 1900s. There was an epidemic of deaths caused of cholera. So here's a result of that 1837 cholera epidemic. 3 members of one family passed away on the same day in Sassano. So this is the church death record. This is the information that we pulled out of it. And when we put the tree together, this is the family. The father had passed away a few years earlier, and the mom had to deal with the deaths. So jumping back the 20 years, before I knew of those records that Peter provided, I learned what I could through the census records that were available at that time. And this is 1930 census between 4764 and 4840 Federal Street. So there's something we need to understand about the Italians that came to Chicago. They settled in a mixed community. It was Italians, African Americans, Italians, African Americans. For over 40 years, they lived in the same community. So this racism that we hear about was not evident with the Italians that came to Chicago, because they didn't mind living among African Americans. As a matter of fact, will be coming up in a couple of slides. There was a report, a dissertation from 1924 that talks about the Federal Street area. So after I did my research regarding the documents from the 16, 17, and 1800s, and found out most of the families that lived on Federal Street, I reached out to Kim at chicagoancestry.com, because I wanted to understand, well, how much did they pay for these houses? The Italians, for the most part, bought the houses on Federal Street. They didn't just rent the houses. So as far as home ownership, they were the majority of the homeowners that lived in the houses that they lived in. So I asked her to get me the real estate track records, which she did. And from the real estate track records, there's document numbers of warranty deeds and so on. So to the best of my budget's ability, I asked her for a good portion of warranty deeds, because hey, how much did those properties cost back in the day? But these track records, every transaction that took place from the time that the property was acquired in 1886 throughout the life of the property is documented. Now, part of the significance of this area of Federal Street, it became popular after the Chicago fire of October of 1871. When all those properties were destroyed due to the fire, the existing Irish and Germans, they moved south. They started to populate this area on Federal Street and the surrounding area. So this was the beginning of the big push outside of that central part of Chicago. So here's an example of a warranty deed dated August 7th, 1911, when Nicola DeBrizzi and his brother Giuseppe purchased the house for $1,500. And what I did, learning from Peter, is I figured I'd open up a Google sheet and all of the track records that pertain to Italians. I documented in the sheets that are, again, searchable. Some of the other interesting information that could be pulled from documents related to those track records are the last will of deceased. And here you can get a sampling of how much things cost back in the day. Bed sheets, 50 cents each. Heater, $5. I mean, it gives you, we're so used to what we know. learning about what was going on back then is fascinating to me. So let's see. Part of this is what he requested when he passed away. How much money his wife should get from his estate, how much his kids should get. It is my wish that a monument and tombstone be erected in my memory within 6 months after my demise, and that monument shall cost not less than $1,000. The executor of his will was one of his sons, Antonio. So Michael Already passed away in 1920. It took so long to go through probate that his son Antonio died in 1924. So they needed somebody else to be the executor of the will. Antonio passed away of tuberculosis. So that wish, he didn't get what he wanted. He chose to be buried in Oakwood Cemetery, which is about 68th and Stony Island, as opposed to where every other Sassano person decided to be buried, which was either Mount Olivet on 111th and about California, Holy Sepulchre, or St. Mary. So I'm sure this is what he had in mind for a monument, and he only got a monument that was $440. So as I'm moving forward, I wanted to again continue to put these families together, and a lot of them, the marriage took place in Sassano, and then they came to Chicago. There's quite a few that the marriages took place in Chicago. So on Family Search, there are records from the Assumption Blessed Virgin Mary at 323 West Illinois in Santa Maria, Incoronata, to 218 Alexander Street. And the baptisms, marriage records, and in some cases, deaths are there. So I went through all the documents, looking for our family, and this is a thumbnail of the documents. And I was able to continue to put those that got married together, and their children who got baptized prior to 1915. And this is just a small sampling of the landing page of my Sassano Chicago website, naming the 85 couples that came from Sassano and migrated to that area of Chicago. So I mentioned earlier, I'd come across University of Chicago dissertation by Ellis Quan Rude. Her dissertation was on the social conditions of the African Americans, well, among the Negroes on Federal Street between 45th and 53rd. So when I saw that document, I'm like, they have to mention the Italians, and they did. So what she writes, small and cluttered areas, litters of filth, garbage, and ashes were found on every block. A great many junk dealers, and our Italians were those junk dealers, live in the region. And the purpose of many of the shacks is to shelter their heaps of old iron bottles, papers, and so forth. Much overcrowding is found among the few Italian residents of Federal Street. In one instance, one adult and 4 children were found sleeping in a room of 810 cubic feet. Another 2 children were found sleeping on the dining room floor. The Italians did what they had to do when they got here. In need of airing after a day's use, there's an occasion instance of a bedroom which is used for household purposes during the day. This is very undesirable, considering the small size and frequently inadequate ventilation. In an Italian house, for example, the child's bedroom was heavily hung with drying herbs and vegetables, which filled the room with rank odor. So again, this is 1924. This is the federal street. Though we didn't experience it, there are documents that we can find. Looking for Italians of Federal Street, you can't find anything. But if you look for information in and about that area, you can read through it, and details of their living conditions and so on could be found. This is what the houses looked like. They lived in what they can afford. Knowing that area of Federal Street, from the downtown area, even beyond, was part of what's known as the Black Belt. And for many years, the Chicago City Council wanted to raise that area. And that's one of the reasons why I believe that, you hear about other areas around Chicago that have Italians that settled, but this area, there's nothing. You have to actually put it together. As early as the 1940s, there were advertisements that they were gonna raise all the buildings. And that prompted some of the Italians to leave early, sell their homes and leave early. But there was still a substantial amount of Italians that stayed until the Chicago Housing Authority claimed eminent domain and pushed them out. Robert Taylor homes, we may have knowledge of, they don't exist anymore either. But as you're driving down the Dan Ryan, you would see the Robert Taylor homes. So what happened to the Italian families that got pushed out? Well, they moved southwest throughout the city. So what was once this tight-knit Italian American community was splintered, and I think that's a reason why, one of the reasons why we don't know of our extended family, because they settled anywhere from Gage Park area, West Lawn, Ashburn, Auburn, Gresham. They just splintered throughout the southwest parts of the city. So I'm also involved in ancestry DNA, 23andMe. I wanted to connect with other families that had my heritage, which over time, they asked, hey, can you assist me finding my pedigree line, which I was more than happy to do. So one story, and I gotta hold on here. This is my favorite story. Was it 2018, 2019? A woman reached out to me because we were a DNA match. And she was looking for her biological parents. And with all the information that I had obtained years prior, we were able to find out who her biological parents were. She was in her late 50s at the time. And thank God her parents were and are still alive. she was able to meet them. And when I saw them, I think it was that Thanksgiving, it was like they were never apart for all those years. Marion is here today. She's the one that we helped find her biological parents. So doing this work has leads to things that you have no idea what it can lead to. And I'm thankful that I could be a part of bringing family together. So as I mentioned earlier, the relationships between people through DNA. And again, in our audience, we have Litzy family, and we're a member of their family. I am 6 cousins to, so most likely it's like 6 cousins once or twice removed is where we are to each other. I have a Cristoforo family that's watching on Zoom, and we're 5th cousin once or twice removed. I went to school with Mark Rubino. I saw that name Rubino over and over again when I was doing the research, and I'm like, could it be? So I reached out to Mark in 2018, and I said, hey, you know where your family's from? And he had an idea, but he wasn't sure. But he said, but my family owned a bar. So nosy me, I went through the census records and said, hey, is this your family? It is. Well, I worked his family pedigree out and found out that he's a 7th cousin once removed. Said, we're cousins. We went to school with each other and we had no idea we're cousins. Going back to the Stavola, I also went to high school with Stavolas, and again, didn't know that they were cousins. They lived down the block from me where I grew up. Didn't know. However, the last one, my good friend Don Casey, we were one of my best friends in elementary school. We owned a business, 10th Planet Comics. Over time, didn't know he was a cousin. His mother always said Cavallone, Cavallone. My mom was best friends with Cavallone, but I didn't put 2 and 2 together. This is years ago when I was a kid. Sure enough, my Irish best friend, his Italian side, were distant cousins as well. So you never know who you're related to when you come across it. So the question of, well, what's removed? A lot of people don't know what removed is. They think that they're not really family, but they are family. All it is the common ancestor. You're off by a couple of generations, possibly. So that's the simplest way to describe what a removed is. So John Rich is the 5th cousin once removed of my father, Frank Cavallone. It's because the common ancestor is 1 generation off by my father. Additionally, I go through newspapers.com and genealogy bank to get additional information to put the family story together. So not only do we get the obituary, which you know would be in the papers, but you'll get 50th wedding anniversary. And then there's the wonderful story of the late James, let's see, a cabinet maker who made a model of St. Margaret of Scotland Church at the 98th and Route. Do you know? Yeah. Okay. So you know, again, if you take the time to research through newspapers and stuff, you can find stuff about, well, you knew about it, but there's you know, you don't know about your family unless you dig. Chicago death certificates up to 1947 are free at the at the family history centers. The one I like to go to is in Wilmette. They're all online at Wilmette. So if you bring your computer or they have a computer and you search, you don't have to go through the microfiche anymore to track them down. Here is three that passed away in 1947, two of which, Mikel Stavola and Mikel Riccio, they both died April 24th, 1947, one at 9 and one at 10. Calente Ben Rubino, he also died in 47. That's the Rubino that I went to school with. That's his great grandfather. You also learn that our family, the Sassanese, were victims of the Spanish flu. Spanish flu in Chicago was between September 21st, 1918 and November 16th, 1918. Angeline D'Amato Riccio, she passed away October 17th, 1918. Giuseppe De Grisi passed away October 31st. And Rosaria Stavola Pinto, November 11th, 1918. So yeah, these events that we hear about in history, when you start to tie them together with family, it means something completely different. Trying to locate where final resting place for family members. Family Search as an area, Archdiocese of Chicago cemetery records. This alleviates my going into the office and pestering the wonderful people behind the desk. Where's this grave located at? So you can search, and this is up to 1989. And it'll give you the record of where the grave is located at, and their home address at the time. Also, for any that are after 1989, you can go to the Archdiocese of Chicago Catholic Cemetery's website and do a search on family members that have passed to find their grave location. I have a presence on Find a Grave called Sassano, Italy in the United States. Every year I do my best to find some graves and make a memorial, take a picture if there's a headstone or monument. Right now I've got about 178 memorial. That includes those that I take pictures of and document, and if somebody else does, say in New York, New Jersey, I'll tag them to become part of this virtual cemetery. And here's some samplings of some monuments found at Mount Olivet, Holy Sepulchre, and St. Mary in the southwest side of Chicago. All right. Any questions? Frank?
I just real simply, the once removed thing.
Yeah.
So if it's like a first couple.
Yeah.
And it's his kid.
That's a once removed.
So the kid is my first cousin once removed?
Yes. Yes.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Well,
Is there anybody alive still who has carried on the dialect?
that they spoke at that time, maybe coming, from Italy to there and continuing it, passing it through the generations, and was still around.
So the uniqueness, okay, so we have the batch of Italians that came in from 1893 to about 1940. And they wanted their families to be American. So they wanted them to speak English. They wanted just to be American. So I don't have the Italian language. I've got friends that are Greeks and Hispanic, and they speak. They carry the traditions. However, the Sassanese that came in the 60s and 70s, they still speak. I'm friends with the DeGrizis here, not too far from here. And
Westchester?
yes.
Yeah.
Their family speaks Italian in the house. I go over there and they're speaking English 1 minute and they're, speaking it, and I crave that, my uncle that recently passed, that helped with some understanding of Sassano. He migrated from Sassano to Venezuela and back to Chicago. He fluently speaks Italian, Spanish, and English, and can easily switch between the languages. He didn't pass it on to his kids, but I would watch him play bocce ball, and he'd be speaking in Italian. So it depends, but definitely those that settled early, they didn't carry the language over, unfortunately.
Funny part is they didn't want to. Like when I was a kid, they don't speak Spanish.
Right.
They don't speak Spanish, speak English.
Yeah. Right. That's
why that generation. We didn't.
Yeah.
Well, my grandmother spoke Italian most of the time. It's like.
Right. They spoke it.
But then my father said, speak English.
That's exactly. Yep, that's right. Exactly.
John, did you find any records of, my understanding was that the family came from Sassano, went through Ellis Island. Do you find a lot of information?
Yeah, when you do if you subscribe to Ancestry, the ship manifests are there. This was basically an overview. We can spend hours on each subject. Yeah, the ship manifests are there.
They're all online.
They're all online. Yeah. Dominic.
John, have you done any in-depth oral histories with any of the people, or any interviews or letters or?
So I was wise enough to bring a scanner back in 2002 to all the families and scan the pictures of the family. I didn't have a video camera at that time, and I didn't have a portable recorder. I didn't know what was going to become of this research, because it, as I said, it was first my family, and then I'm like, well, all these families are from Sassano, so why not? And so I didn't have the foresight at that time to go out and get a recorder. I wish I did. They're all gone now. Everybody that in 2002 that I reached out to that shared the photos of the family, they're all gone now. So in saying that, those that are watching on Zoom and YouTube later, get that passion to ask the questions, because you don't know when that history will be gone forever. Those, teenagers, young 20s, talk to your parents. If your grandparents are still around, talk to your grandparents, ask them, hey, what was life like when you were younger? It's the only way we can capture and keep a record of our family history. That's why I'm so passionate about Dominic's work here, saving our stories. Jason, who's on the other side of this, he works on the interior of the books. I work on the covers. If you have a story to tell it. It doesn't have to cost you any money. Tell the story, reach out to Dominic with your story and let's get it published. If you're not gonna make a lot of money, write down.
But in the old days, you used to have to pay money to upfront to publish a vanity book. Now, Amazon lets you publish with no cost upfront. You just upload your file to Amazon or find somebody like Jason who can do it for you, and you create a book. And the book is available to you as an author, and the cost of Xeroxing about. It can be available all over the world and in the JCCIA library. And people can get it on Kindle, and you can give it to all your relatives for Christmas. And
Any other?
and John, would you go through how you would look up somebody in the newspaper?
Okay, so if you subscribe to, Dominic asked, how do you find information on the newspapers? So if you subscribe to newspapers.com or Genealogy Bank, there's a search. You just put in the person's name, first and last name, just last name, and do a search. You can narrow it by region or time period, and you just search and you click on the results and visually go through one by one.
Yeah. Most public libraries, you go on their computer system, they subscribe to, say, the Tribune archives.
Mhm.
You can find out where your family name was mentioned
Right.
in the Tribune archives, or the New York Times. I get access to the New York Times through Loyola University, but you can probably do any good library.
So Dominic's, for those on Zoom that didn't hear that, Dominic said that you can go to any public library and they have subscriptions to these newspaper databases that you could do these searches as well.
You kept mentioning Federal Street. I'm not familiar with Chicago. Where is that located?
Federal Street, have you ever been on the Dan Ryan Expressway? Yes. Okay. So approximately 51st, there was a 51st Street exit. So at that 51st Street exit, if you were to take that 51st Street exit, Federal Street would be a couple of blocks east of that.
So it's parallel to them.
Yes, yes.
That's across the street from stadium, White Sox Stadium. I think.
White Sox Stadium is about 39th-ish.
Yeah.
So it's a few miles south of that. Yes. Yes.
So are you currently working on a project now, gathering information?
I just finished the 6th Sassano Chicago book that gets into more detail about what we talked about. So at the moment, I've not necessarily wrapped up because this project never really ends, but I'm in pause. Yes.
Review what's in those books.
So the first book I published in 2019 basically talks about the discovery process with the records from Sassano. Talks about a history of Sassano and slightly talks about Chicago in the church. And then there's, of course, there's census records in here and some death records and monuments and so on. And then, and this was before I put all of the Federal Street families, I did the pedigree all the way back to the 1600s. So once I completed the pedigree to the 1600s, I produced 4 volumes of pedigree charts, and each volume, it's alphabetical. First one is Abate Marco to Caputo, and it's not the Caputo restaurant, grocery stores that we know of. And so this is basically the charts that are, I have my great grandfather's pedigree chart in the back hanging off of the wall. So these are those charts. And then the last book, I wanted to focus on Chicago, the families that settled on Federal Street. So I talk more about Federal Street, who the early settlers from Sassano were, including that Cano Stavola, who that was a difficult one to find because they butchered his surname. He married Stavola as a Stavola, and by the time he had children and was deceased, his name became Stavolo. So if you were to search Stavola, you wouldn't find him. But again, the luxury of the internet today, you could find the church records that shows his marriage. And once you enter that information in Ancestry, you'll see similarities of, oh, okay, this name turned into this name. So I talk about, you know, again, everybody who came, they may have originally settled in New York and they came to Chicago. One of the spouses passed away, they remarried. So I get into all the families, all the 85 families. You know, I don't know specific details about them, but at least if somebody's doing research, trying to find your family history and you match, you can go back further. A quick story. My great grandfather, his brother Vincenzo, came over, lived in Chicago, and he in 1911 was hit by a train and died. And his spouse took his boys back to Italy. And then there's a record that shows in 1924 they came back to America in New Jersey. And one of the things I really wanted to do was find them. And through Facebook, I looked for that name, the Cavallone name, and I found them. And I said, hey, is this your great grandfather? So we connected. They were trying to do the research going backward, and because he passed so young, it's hard to find. And so I was able to help them put the puzzle together for themselves. Vincenzo.
Do you think if you brought this research to your original town,
Mhm.
think they would appreciate what you've done, or would they find it useful?
I would think so. I would.
Because you could connect the two.
Yes, absolutely. When I find
But
my,
then you have to find it.
right, yes,
Beautiful.
I need,
They don't-
yeah, I need to find a translator. Yeah, absolutely. So Vincenzo asked, I should bring those books to Sassano, and I do have intentions when I do make it over there. Yes, Dominic.
Well, do you have some examples of people who had exciting lives, became millionaires, became gangsters, whatever?
Okay, for the most part, I see the Sassanese as your average, blue collar, there were a few, Club de Lisa on State Street. The four brothers were from Sassano. So, that was probably the most popular, of the Sassanese. Frank Novello, he owned a grocery store on Federal Street, and during the Depression, he offered food on credit to his Sassanese family, family in the area. He's got a single mausoleum in St. Mary's Cemetery on the southeast side. So obviously having a single mausoleum, he obviously made it monetarily, but they're all successful. They risk life, they risk a lot coming to America and trying to start anew. So to me, they're all heroes.
Would you like to know what Cavallone did in that?
Big horse.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I had a question about, you talked about getting the death certificates, the Chicago death records from the Family History Center. So I was wondering if there's any advantages to doing that if you are unable to find them. So when I do on the Family History Center, if I do a search, I have multiple family members who I cannot find. So are there any advantages or any better ways to search at the Family History Center versus just, doing it online? Because I didn't know if it would be worth the trip, basically. Thank you.
So are they up to 1947 or are they after?
Yeah, they're in the early 1920s.
They're in the, okay. So there's a possibility, a very high possibility, that the record's named, the spelling is horrible.
Mm-hmm.
As the majority of the records that I pulled from them, the spellings were butchered. I'd have to put all these different variables in the searches. So you have my email address based on the slideshow, right?
I believe so. I don't have the email up in front of me right now, but.
It's up now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Email me the names and if do you know the death dates or not?
Off the top of my head, I don't have it in front of me.
Oh, no.
Oh, but yes, I do. I have death dates.
Okay, so email me the information.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do what I can to help you find them. And once I find them, I'll give you the code numbers that you'd have to ask the people at the Wilmette History Center, and they'll help you find the actual document on the website.
So if I'm not in the Chicagoland area, we do have a Family History Center where I'm at, though. Can they do it at any Family History Center?
Yes, they could do it at any Family History Center, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other Zoom questions?
Hi, John. This is Sue
Sue.
Albergo Vasquez. Hello, cousin, somewhere down the road. I just want, and I have another cousin on the line too. She might have a question, but I just want to say thank you so much for taking your time. I know this has just been an extreme, I don't even know. I mean, I can't imagine the energy and timing you've put into all of this. And is it safe to say we can get your books on Amazon, or how would we order your books?
Yeah, the books are available on Amazon.
Okay.
And I also have copies that you can get through me if somehow we can get together. So yeah, we can, we could figure out either Amazon or me catching up with you at the restaurant or something.
Yeah, sounds good. And then you had mentioned a possible interest in going to Italy in 2023. Have you gotten a lot of feedback on that? Is that something that maybe could work, or where we are at that, on that?
So I'm working with the digital family with that. So I'm, you know, hoping to get some information after the first of the year. Cause they have a home out there. Well, before COVID, they would go back and forth regularly. So, you know, I'm hoping to hear something about, you know, putting the group together and going in 2023.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I'm sorry, what was the last name? What family?
Breezy?
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you again for everything.
Sure, you're welcome. Any additional questions from Zoom? No? Any other questions, Dominic?
Well, I'd like to hear from the audience members.
Sure.
On outlining their experience of their families in the migration from Sassano, and maybe in their experience in Chicago, if they know it.
Sure. Anyone want to volunteer?